Everyone knows the story of the fallen angels, or at least they think they do. But what few realize is that the origin of evil, the celestial rebellion, and even the Great Flood, begins with a mysterious group known as the Watchers. They weren't cast out because of pride like Lucifer. They came down by choice, a choice that would forever alter the fate of humanity. They were angels sent to observe, but they did far more than that. The Book of Enoch reveals they fell in love with human women, and that was only the first transgression. What happens when celestial beings cross sacred boundaries? The answer lies far beyond what's taught in churches or schools. Imagine heaven in silence. The Creator sends his angels to watch over the earth, to preserve divine order. But when they looked upon the daughters of men, something changed inside them. They didn't just admire, they desired, and that passion led them to take human women as wives. Have you ever wondered why the Bible mentions giants before the flood in Genesis 6:4? There were giants on the earth in those days. When the sons of God went to the daughters of men, that's no metaphor. It's a direct echo of what Enoch describes in chilling detail. They didn't just create hybrid offspring, they gave humanity knowledge it was never meant to possess. The pre-flood civilization thrived with knowledge, but at what cost? Azazel taught men to forge swords, knives, and shields, introducing warfare. Semjaza revealed enchantments, astrology, seduction. Women learned how to use makeup and ornaments to manipulate. It was the birth of corrupted power, an advancement that came far too soon. Humanity began playing God, guided by beings who had broken celestial law. And the more they learned, the further they drifted from divine harmony. It wasn't just knowledge. It was spiritual corruption disguised as evolution. But why does this matter today? Because the story of the Watchers isn't just an ancient tale, it's a mirror. It warns us of the danger of knowledge without wisdom, of how even the most elevated beings can fall and take others down with them. The Book of Enoch was removed from the official Bible, yet it remained preserved in Ethiopian texts and was widely known in the time of Jesus. So why was it silenced? Perhaps because the Watcher's story reveals too much. It shows that heaven wasn't always united, that the spiritual war began long before Satan appeared. Semjaza, their leader, was respected among the angels. He was the one who orchestrated the pact on Mount Hermon, sealing the fate of the 200 angels who chose to descend. They swore never to turn back. It was the first recorded celestial conspiracy. They weren't deceived. They were volunteers. They knew the consequences. And yet, they came. Because desire, forbidden love, and curiosity are powerful forces, even in the heavens. And here's where the story turns even darker. Their children, the Nephilim, weren't just giants. They were monsters. They ravaged the earth, devouring men, animals, and even each other. This corrupted world reached a point of no return. That's why the Creator chose to cleanse the earth with water. The flood didn't come only because of human sin. It came because of angelic interference that had twisted all of creation. Noah was the last righteous one, and the last pure. His bloodline remained uncontaminated. That part is rarely preached. But Enoch makes it clear. The blood of the Nephilim cried out to heaven, and the Watchers knew judgment was near. The earth was becoming unrecognizable, and heaven could wait no longer. This isn't just a story about angels and humans. It's about the boundary between worlds, about what happens when the spiritual crosses into the physical without permission, about the danger of seeking too much, too fast. But it's also about you, about what you learn, and who teaches you. Who are the Watchers today? Who is trying to reshape humanity with knowledge? And why do we feel deep down that something is wrong with the modern world? This story begins in heaven, but it ends here, now, and you're already a part of it. High atop Mount Hermon, where only stone and silence remain today, something happened that still echoes through time. The story tells that 200 angels made a sacred, or rather, profane, pact there. They knew what they were about to do had no return. It wasn't an isolated mistake, but a collective decision. Semjaza, their leader, feared being the only one to fall, so he proposed that they all swear together, one for all, and all for the transgression. That oath was sealed with fire, like the ancient covenants that scar both skin and destiny. They became the Watchers, but not because they watched, because they defied. Imagine the tension among them. Beings of light, created for obedience, trembling before an impossible choice: remain eternal observers, or plunge into the pleasures and dangers of the flesh. Mount Hermon became the site of the first spiritual mutiny. The heavens trembled, and earth received them as gods. To humanity, they were bringers of power. To heaven, they were traitors. The war had not yet begun, but the first act of rebellion was already written. And that oath, forgotten by centuries, still resonates in the memory of apocryphal texts. Each watcher had a specific role. Azazel taught the secrets of metalwork, warfare, and seduction. Penemu revealed the use of herbs and the hidden power of words. Gadrael, according to Enoch, was the one who brought deception into paradise. Yes, perhaps he was the true tempter of Eden. These names are hidden from most modern doctrines, but each one holds a key to understanding why the world lost its innocence. They didn't just teach techniques. They altered the very spiritual DNA of humanity. Eden wasn't lost in a day. It was slowly corrupted by celestial hands. The Pact of the 200 wasn't just an act of disobedience. It was the opening of a portal. The boundary between worlds was torn. What was sacred became accessible. And when the Nephilim were born, the earth was no longer the same. These hybrid beings grew fast, were strong, intelligent, and insatiable. They fed on everything. Their hunger was both physical and spiritual. They were living proof that heaven and earth were never meant to merge. And worse, they were worshipped by humans as demigods. The stories of ancient gods may not be myth. They might be memory. A memory tradition tried to erase. But why was this story hidden? Because it threatens the structure. If evil began with rebellious angels and not just human sin, then responsibility is shared. And more, it reveals that heaven can be divided. That challenges the image of a perfect, unshakable divine order. The Book of Enoch was banned from official councils, but it remained hidden among Ethiopian manuscripts, Dead Sea Scrolls, and oral traditions. The Pact of the 200 was buried, but never forgotten, because some stories survive precisely because they were forbidden. Today, few people know that the word Hermon means curse. The mountain where it all began became a symbol of the rupture. Ancient cultures avoided speaking of it, but ruins and records still suggest something remained there, as if something had been left behind. Perhaps a mark, perhaps a prison. In some Jewish traditions, it's believed that the fallen angels were imprisoned beneath the earth, chains of fire, eternal darkness, not as a common punishment, but as a warning. So it would never happen again. But what if one of them still watches? You start to realize the story they told you wasn't the whole story, that there are layers hidden beneath the official texts, that good and evil may have deeper and older roots than we ever imagined. The Pact of the 200 wasn't just the beginning of a fall. It was the first step in an invisible war that still shapes the world today. A war for knowledge, for power, and for souls. When the Watchers crossed sacred boundaries and took human women as wives, something unprecedented was born in the history of creation. The Nephilim. They weren't just giants, as some summaries suggest. They were beings of immense strength, accelerated intelligence, and an insatiable hunger. According to the Book of Enoch, they consumed everything, crops, animals, humans, and when nothing was left, they turned on each other. The earth groaned under the weight of these titans. Nature itself seemed to recoil at their presence. They were children of heaven, but their hearts were poisoned by chaos. The ancient Sumerians, Greeks, Egyptians, they all speak of giant gods who walked among men, mythical figures with supernatural powers, born from the union of gods and mortals. But what if those legends are distorted echoes of the same origin? The Nephilim may have been the foundation of all these tales. They weren't gods. They were mistakes. They were the reflection of a cosmic imbalance that should have never occurred. The impact of their existence was so deep that even today, we still resonate with fear for what we cannot fully comprehend. These beings didn't just dominate mankind. They spiritually enslaved them. They built cities, kingdoms, empires. They stood behind the most advanced civilizations of antiquity. They didn't just hunger for food, they craved worship. And humans, mesmerized by their power, turned them into deities. Temples were raised, sacrifices offered. It was a golden age for the Nephilim. and a dark age for the human soul. The line between the human and the divine was distorted. The world seemed to evolve, but corruption flowed through its veins. What's most terrifying is their awareness. They knew who they were. They knew they were abominations. Some sought dominance, others simply survival. But all of them carried within the conflict between celestial spirit and corrupted flesh. The Book of Enoch describes how their spirits, upon death, didn't return to heaven nor to earth, but became bodiless entities, demons. That changes everything we understand about evil. Maybe demons aren't creatures from hell, but echoes of the Nephilim, trapped between dimensions, longing for a vessel. This concept appears in many ancient cultures. Wandering spirits, sleeping giants, hidden beings beneath mountains or buried in the earth. Even modern reports of entities may be connected to these ancient presences. What if the evil we face today is merely a continuation of something far older, something that began when heaven mixed with earth? The story of the Nephilim forces us to look backward and inward, because perhaps part of them still lives in us, in the hunger for power, in the urge to transcend limits, in the worship of the extraordinary. Humanity paid a heavy price for this alliance. The spiritual and physical worlds collapsed. The presence of the Nephilim distorted even the natural order. Animals began to mutate. Plants stopped bearing fruit. It was as if creation itself began to unravel from within, not by divine will, but by the rupture of cosmic balance. And at the center of it all were these children of the abyss, creatures that should never have existed, yet left traces in stones, legends, and perhaps even in our blood. There are clues, genetic fragments, buried stories waiting to be unearthed. There's something strange about the way certain mysteries pull us, as if something needs to be understood, even if we don't know why. As if a forgotten memory is trying to resurface, demanding attention. And when that happens, we can't ignore it anymore. We have to look again, gather the pieces, connect the shadows. If something inside you stirred too, leave a comment and subscribe. Not out of habit, but because some questions simply refuse to go unanswered. There came a moment when the cries of earth were so loud, so desperate, that they reached the celestial realms. The angels who had remained faithful heard them. The souls of the oppressed cried out for justice. And then, the throne responded, not with lightning or earthquakes, but with a decision, a judgment. The Watchers, who had descended with promises of protection, were now accused before the Creator himself. The children of rebellion had turned the world into a distortion of creation, as if everything once designed in harmony was now being violated, from the inside out. The Book of Enoch reveals that the archangel Uriel himself was sent to deliver the verdict. Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel were given their commands. Michael would imprison the rebellious angels. Raphael would bind Azazel in the desert of Dudael, in deep darkness, and Gabriel would destroy the offspring of the Watchers, the Nephilim, so their spirits would no longer corrupt the earth. The judgment began in silence, but its impact was thunderous. Imagine heaven moving with purpose, justice, and serene fury. What began with forbidden passion would end in eternal chains. But the Creator does not destroy without first warning. That's why Enoch, the man who walked with God, was chosen to be the mediator. He was taken to the heavens, alive, to record the accusations, hear the pleas of the fallen angels, and serve as a witness. Yes, the Watchers tried to defend themselves. They wept, they begged, they pleaded for forgiveness, but the judgment had already been sealed. Their tears were not accepted, because they knew what they were doing, and the earth was dying. The time for reflection had passed. It was now time to divide light from darkness once again. The visions Enoch describes are disturbing. He saw the Watchers trapped in chambers of fire, chained beneath the mountains. He saw massive angels trembling before judgment. He saw the Nephilim swept away like dust by forces we cannot comprehend. And more, he saw the flood before it came, a sea rising, swallowing cities, towers, fields, and forgotten empires. It wasn't just a climate event. It was a purification. Creation needed to breathe again. And to do so, everything that had been corrupted had to be drowned. Azazel received the harshest punishment, bound with fiery chains in a dark abyss, where stones melt and time does not exist. There, according to the text, he awaits the final judgment. It's curious how the name Azazel later appears in Hebrew tradition, as the one who receives the scapegoat, the bearer of the people's sins into the wilderness. It's as if his presence is still felt, even after his imprisonment, as if his fall left a scar on history, and perhaps on the human soul as well. The flood came, as promised, but before the waters fell, one righteous man was set apart, Noah. He wasn't just good, he was pure. His bloodline had not been tainted by the corruption of the watchers. That's why he was chosen. His ark was more than a boat. It was a portal between worlds, a fragment of the old order preserved in the midst of chaos. And when the rain stopped and the waters receded, humanity was given a chance to begin again. But did the shadows really vanish with the Nephilim? Or did they simply change form, waiting for the right time to return? It's strange how certain stories cut through us, as if something within them resonates in our bones, the sense that we're reading more than myth, maybe fragments of something we once knew but forgot. And deep down, when a detail fits, when a revelation touches you, it's like an invisible window opens. And in that moment, the impulse rises to comment, to leave a mark, to become part of it. Because maybe, just maybe, understanding this story is the first step toward remembering who we are. And if something inside you has awakened, subscribe and write it down, or that echo might be lost in the noise of the world. When the waters of the flood receded, many believed the watchers had been erased from history. But truth rarely dies, it only changes form. Enoch wrote that the spirits of the Nephilim, belonging neither to heaven nor earth, continued to wander. They became demons, invisible entities hungry for bodies, for worship, for attention, beings that cannot exist fully without a host. And that dark echo crossed the centuries, disguised as mythology, folklore, unexplained phenomena. The civilizations that emerged after the flood inherited symbols, names, structures, and ideas that echo the ancient times. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki. The Egyptians worshipped beings with human faces and animal bodies. The Greeks told stories of gods descending and possessing mortals. There are too many similarities to ignore. In every corner of the world, there are legends of fallen entities, beings from above who taught secret knowledge and received sacrifices. What if all of these are just different ways of telling the same forgotten story? Ruins like those at Baalbek in Lebanon or the Nazca lines in Peru remain mysteries that defy conventional explanation. Stones weighing hundreds of tons, placed with millimeter precision. Lines only visible from the sky. Cultures with no modern technology, yet with advanced knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and metallurgy. Who taught them all this? Why do so many ancient cultures say they received this wisdom from gods who came from the stars? Traditional history has no answers, but forbidden books offer clues. And what about human DNA? There are fragments in our genetic code we can't explain. Junk DNA, they call it. But what if it's not junk? What if it's inheritance? A forgotten signature from a union that should never have happened? Some alternative researchers suggest that the genes of the Nephilim may have left subtle marks in humanity, in intelligence, in strength, even in spirituality. A remnant of a lineage the flood tried to erase, but that may have survived, hidden among the nations. Modern archaeology has begun to uncover elongated skulls, giant skeletons, and artifacts that don't fit the official timeline. Many are concealed, labeled anomalies, or simply forgotten in storage. But truth persists, because some things cannot be explained by simple evolution. The leap in human consciousness was too abrupt. It's as if we were pushed, as if someone, at some point, interfered with the natural flow of human development. The watchers were silenced, but not erased. And maybe their influence still manifests, not with wings or fire, but with ideas, systems, technologies, philosophies, concepts that accelerate, enchant, and divide. Could some modern advances be divine inspiration, or just a repetition of an ancient mistake? Are we closer to truth, or simply digging deeper into the same abyss? The line between progress and perversion has never been thinner. And maybe, by looking back, we can begin to see where it all started repeating. Sometimes all it takes is one forgotten piece for the puzzle to start making sense. A detail, a name, a symbol. And when that piece fits, something shifts. You begin to see the world differently. There's no going back to pretending you didn't see it or feel it. And in that moment, as if from somewhere deep and silent, the urge to record that awakening rises. So write what changed your view, comment what echoed inside you, and subscribe, because once the veil begins to fall, the mind only wants more. For centuries, entire civilizations have spoken of portals, not metaphors, real passages between worlds, places where the veil between dimensions grows thin, where entities can move through. Mount Hermon, the pyramids, Stonehenge, even regions of the Amazon, all are named in legends as crossing zones. The Watchers didn't fall by accident. They descended, and every descent requires an entry point. If portals exist, who kept them open? And more importantly, were they sealed or merely forgotten? The Book of Enoch describes the imprisonment of the Watchers in deep abysses, but not all texts agree that every one of them was captured. There are hints that some escaped, fled, or simply hid. In Gnostic, Zoroastrian, and even indigenous traditions, there are stories of wandering gods who roam in solitude, preserving their lineage in secret, silent heirs hidden among us. What if some of the Watchers still walk the earth, not with wings, but with blood? Many scholars overlook it, but the Book of Jubilees, a lesser-known apocryphal text, states that after the flood, the children of the Nephilim reappeared. The Rephaim, Zamzumim, Emim, and other names briefly mentioned in the Bible. Smaller giants but still distinct, beings who re-emerge in the wars of Israel. Goliath, for example, may have been a direct descendant of that lineage, and more. Ancient texts suggest that this bloodline continued to dilute across generations. In other words, the descendants of the Watchers might still be out there, but how would you recognize them? We're not talking about 3-meter-tall monsters. We're talking about subtle inheritances, people with a different kind of spiritual sensitivity, unusual intelligence, magnetic charm, a fascination with the occult, an unexplained attraction to ancient symbols. Sometimes they lead, other times they isolate, but almost always they are restless. They carry something they can't name, a kind of silent calling, a hunger for answers no book can offer. Are these traits just coincidence, or echoes of a sleeping lineage? And it doesn't stop there. The number 33 shows up frequently in stories about these figures. It's the highest degree in Freemasonry. It's linked to stargates, and to Mount Hermon itself, which lies at 33 degrees latitude and longitude. Could that be a sign? The ancients never used numbers by accident. They encoded messages, and maybe, if we connect the dots, we'll see a pattern, a map, a legacy that didn't end with the Watchers' imprisonment, but was hidden, reorganized, and passed on through symbols, families, secret orders. The modern world seems obsessed with opening doors. Scientists search for the God particle. Projects like CERN toy with the idea of accessing parallel dimensions. But no one asks, what if those doors were already opened once before? What if the Watchers were the first to cross them? And now, unknowingly, we're repeating the same mistake. Our appetite for the unknown has grown, but our discernment has shrunk. And every time we move forward without wisdom, the ancient echoes draw closer. Maybe you've felt it. A strange sensation when hearing certain names, seeing certain places or symbols. A chill without reason. As if part of you recognizes something you've never seen. As if a memory that isn't yours is trying to surface. And then, without realizing, you start searching, investigating, commenting, sharing, subscribing. Not as someone curious, but as someone who knows. Deep down, they're trying to return to something lost, or uncover something they've always known. What began as a celestial rebellion wasn't just a historical error. It was a seed, something that fell to earth and took root inside us. The Watchers descended with promises, desires, hunger, and secrets. And perhaps, more than teaching, they imprinted their essence into human consciousness. Since then, we've carried this duality, the longing for transcendence, and the pull of the abyss. This tension between light and shadow, between what we want to uncover and what we were meant to forget, defines our very existence. The Bible says we were created in the image and likeness of God. But what happens when that image is tainted by something that was never meant to be part of it? The Book of Enoch suggests that the Watchers' corruption wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. They rewrote how humans perceive the sacred. We became fascinated by power, by control, by knowledge that promises freedom but leads to bondage. And every time we seek these things without spiritual roots, it's as if we're answering an ancient call, an echo that still vibrates within us. Great religions, esoteric schools, even scientific movements all share a common origin, the desire to touch the invisible. But not every search leads to light, and that is the true legacy of the Watchers, to show us that not everything that descends from heaven comes in the name of good. Some come to confuse, to manipulate, to reprogram. They offered tools, but hid the cost. And before you realize it, you're already trapped in a new prison, made of ideas, promises, and illusions that look like truth. Have you ever felt like something is missing from the world? That the answers are always incomplete? That systems, narratives, speeches, all seem to be hiding something vital? Maybe it's because we were conditioned to forget. The texts were banned, the symbols distorted, the names erased, and the true story buried beneath layers of convenience. But when someone starts digging, even without knowing why, something awakens, and a dangerous truth emerges. We were made to remember. The fight isn't against giants of flesh and bone. It's against inherited ideas, against forgetting, against repeating the same mistake. Today's battle is spiritual, and the heirs of the Watchers, knowingly or not, still try to cross the veil. Through screens, through algorithms, through subtle manipulations that make the false desirable and the real unbearable. We are surrounded by voices, but not all of them come from the light. And sometimes, the voice that calls to us most is the one echoing from where everything first began to fall. What if all of this is more than curiosity? What if the very fact that you're reading, feeling, thinking is already part of something greater, as if an invisible thread brought you here, not by accident but by necessity, not for entertainment, but for remembrance? Some stories are not just heard, they are recognized, because in some way, they were already inside you, and each revelation doesn't teach. It simply confirms what your soul somehow always knew. Maybe that's why you're still here, breathing deeper, with racing thoughts and a restless heart, because something in you resonated. And when the soul recognizes a forgotten truth, it moves. It wants to speak, to leave a mark, to never forget. So write it down. Share what you felt, what you understood, what pierced through you, and subscribe, not out of habit, but because there's much more waiting for those who choose to keep going. Some doors only open when we show we're ready to walk through them.